radio with an answer for everything.
Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, I'm Rob Brenda, with you on Talk Radio until 7 o'clock. And now, as I say, for something completely different. Apparently there is no such thing as normal. Events of the last 2 years have created a discussion about what the new normal is and how it could shape the future. And there's been some new research by Oatly, the UK's leading oat drink brand. I have to say, when I heard about oat milk, well, don't get me started, but nevertheless, they've done some research and they reveal that there may, in fact, be no normal. And whilst the societal definition of normal has changed over the course of the pandemic, is new normal really any different to the old normal? And what does the word normal really mean? Now, who better to help us with this than National Treasure and lexicographer Susie Dent? First of all, as I always ask you, where does the root of the word normal come from, Susie Dent?
Right. It actually began with a carpenter's square. So norma for the Romans was exactly that. It was kind of two straight arms at right angles and a tool that was used to ensure straight edges. And from there we got the idea of normal being done according to the rule or the square. So it's all about a kind of standard set of affairs or conforming to a regular pattern. And actually enormous originally meant abnormal. It meant out of the standard or away from the standard, and eventually it settled on a kind of unusual size.
So I have Sarah in the studio with me, who's our brilliant assistant producer today. And what we did before speaking to you was tried to think collectively about ways in which we'd like the word normal to be deployed or to be used when describing us, or how when it's good and when it's bad. And despite lots of people, especially my listeners, who have lots of strong opinions, Susie, about lifestyles and goodness knows what else, actually we worked out, and we think we're right about this, that the only time we'd ever like to be described as normal is in a medical context.
I agree. Your scan is normal is joyous, isn't it? That's just exactly what you want to hear.
I think it's the line, I can't remember who said it, that the greatest words in the English language are not I love you, but it's benign.
It's Woody Allen, I think.
Oh, well, perhaps so, but jogging swiftly on from him. I've got Sarah on for you. Do you feel like that? You know, people sort of have strong political views about goodness knows what it is, and, you know, mainstream, and this is right and wrong, but they don't want to be normal.
No, who does? Normal in the sense of personality.
How old are you, by the way? Sorry,
23.
Okay, good. Yeah,
normal in the sense of personality. If someone were to call me normal, to me, that's boring. I don't want to be normal.
Right.
I want to be weird or
quirky.
Yeah, quirky, because then I can bring something to the table.
We were working some. I mean, the reason I asked that question is that I wonder whether the word "so and so is normal" has taken on a new tenor, become slightly pejorative, that it means sort of boring and mainstream and unable to think outside of the box. And I mean, obviously. Language changes. Could you sort of envisage a time where when the OED updates its definitions of the word normal, that it could be used against somebody in that way, almost as an insult? So and so is, well, normal.
Yeah, I mean, language flips like this all the time, I have to say. And it was quite interesting that the research that Oatly did show that actually 50% already don't know what the correct definition of normal is. So it's already on the move. And as you know, language is a democracy, and that's reflected in the dictionaries. They're descriptive. They don't prescribe how we should use language. So yes, I can see that. I mean, if you look back to words like nice, for example, that comes from the Latin necius, meaning no knowledge. It meant people who were really ignorant. They were seen as being ignorant. So that one went from an insult to something that was then, you know, it meant humble and modest, and then eventually to being quite pleasant. But nowadays, if you were to say, it's nice, that again could be a sort of mixed compliment. So it's kind of going back on itself, and language is incredibly circular. And that may well happen to normal, but I mean, there's a whole spectrum of normals, and I think we've all begun to, well, maybe not begun to, but I think we've all acutely realised that in the last 2 years. And I think that's absolutely fine. And it was interesting listening to Linda earlier in your interview that, you know, whatever you're feeling during times of grief is normal, she said. And that just sums it up really, doesn't it? Because it's such a personal thing. It's a completely subjective word for us now.
Yeah, it's a subjective word. It's whatever's right for you. I've got Sarah here because she's 23, and are you Gen? What are you? Gen
I don't
Y,
know.
Z,
I'm
whatever?
kind of like Gen Z, millennial, cut off. I don't really know.
Well, when
I'm in the beginning.
speak to young people, I mean, none of them, regardless of background, want to be called normal. It's like the worst thing ever. It's like quite a serious cuss, as they would say.
It's almost like, I'm going to really show my age. So Emily Blunt said in an interview with Jimmy Fallon that when Brits say, oh, it's pretty good, we don't actually mean that it's good. But if an American were to say it's pretty good, they mean, yeah, that's great, that's amazing, that's awesome. Pretty good in our sense is kind of not that great, could be better.
Right.
So it's kind of like if someone would say you're normal, it means I'm bland. It means I'm boring, not that really interesting. And all about now is about being interesting and having that thing that can sell, especially with, Instagram and
Well, I think
TikTok
everyone wants to be sort of interesting to some extent, interesting to other people and interesting to themselves, and it's how language evolves, and as Susie describes, it is a democracy. Just lastly, what I've got you here, what was the mission for Oatly doing this research, Susie?
Well, what they were looking at in particular was the labels with which we identify our kind of dietary choices. So it's really interesting, actually. So is it actually harmful to have a proliferation of labels like flexitarian as well as vegan and vegetarian, flexitarian or climatarian or carnivarian, or there are lots of them that are quite oblique to a lot of people. And actually, are we dividing ourselves into tribes when actually having a bit of oat milk in your coffee, and I love oat milk, Rob, so I'll have that argument with you another time.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
Or having a vegan muffin, do we then have to kind of commit wholesale to something, or can we take small steps towards being more sustainable? And I think that was what they were exploring, is, the need, we have such a drive to label ourselves in every aspect of our lives, and actually, in this case, is it hindering more than it's helping?
Well, language evolves, and the new normal is that there is no new normal. There you are. I can't even speak normally. Because I thank you so much, Susie Dent. Enlightening and enlightened as ever. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you, Sarah. You are anything but normal, as are you, dear listener. None of you are normal. I mean that as a compliment. I'm with you, Rob Rinder, until 7 o'clock. This is Rob Rinder on Trial. 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 7 o'clock. This is Rob Rinder.